The work on this feeling actually started last year. It was around the same time that I had started therapy. Why I went for therapy? Well, there's a lifetime of reasons for that. But suffice to say, the years of growing up as the sibling of a mentally ill person, there is an impact, okay? There is an impact no matter how okay the other sibling seems or the well child seems. And long story short, sometime last year I decided that, yeah, just talking to my husband and to my good friends was not enough. I needed professional help. I think I wanted to go and check it out and see whether it would help me deal better with all the very strong emotions that I was feeling, regarding the whole situation and everything and how it has impacted me. So I went for therapy, and around that same time that I was going for therapy was also the time that Julian and I formed BuddhaInTheBalcony, and we started working on songs together. So one day I had finished my therapy session and I had learned about the concept of childhood emotional neglect, which is something that is a very important concept that I'd like to just share briefly about. It's basically a concept that is invisible, that people can just forget about it. When you say that, oh, you were emotionally neglected as a child, I mean, especially if you've grown up pretty well off or you have had all the physical things you need, don't expect a lot of people to kind of understand what that impact is. But it is something that it affects a significant proportion of the population, well, at least in Singapore for sure, because this year I read a report that was done by the Institute of Mental Health in Singapore, and during the survey they had polled adults on adverse childhood experiences, which is ACEs for short, that's the acronym. And one of the majority of the population identified emotional neglect as the ACE that they had. ACEs can include things such as divorce or physical abuse or mental illness in the family as well. And I think it was about like over 40 something percentage of people identified emotional neglect as the main ACE that they had, which means that there are so many people walking around with having had lacking the emotional support they needed when they were growing up, which, yeah, probably might manifest in emotional issues as they age, as they grow up, mental health issues as well. So this is definitely a very important concept which a lot of people may not be aware of, or they may ignore it, but I think it really goes to explaining a lot about people's maybe behaviors or attitudes or how they feel about things, etc. So back to why I wrote the song. I have always had very intense reactions to certain things that would trigger me. I also felt a lot of like anger, resentment, and hatred, and guilt, and sadness. Things that would just like really, yeah, bring me down a lot. And I felt I could never explain why, because after all, I grew up in a very well-off family and I had everything that I could physically want and more. I was doing very well in school, I had a great career, and everything appeared fine. But yeah, I would often, just like cry by myself and cry like as if the world was ending, and I would have very extreme reactions to things that may seem very harmless. So it all became clearer when the concept of emotional neglect was explained to me during therapy, which is, when we're young and you don't have the parental figure who can support you emotionally, you develop your own coping mechanisms. As a child, you may develop mechanisms like avoiding it or being aggressive, which maybe when you were young, that was your coping mechanism, but as you grow older, these become maladaptive coping mechanisms, which if you don't address, obviously it will impede, a very like healthy mental well-being and all that. So just reading about it and studying it made me feel like, yeah, this explains a lot. And because I could identify that, I started working on it, and how to improve my attitudes and my feelings towards things. So one day after therapy, I was just sitting down, and then I just decided, the words just came out, and I literally wrote this feeling in 5 minutes or so. It's essentially a song, a letter to my parents, and in fact a letter to any parent out there who has to deal with a mentally ill child, but who also has other children, to not forget about the okay child, to realize that yes, there is no such thing as them not being impacted, no matter how okay they seem. So to make sure that while yes, you're struggling dealing with the suffering child, the mentally ill child, to also not forget about the other child, to make sure that they have the adequate support and understanding of what's going on. That is essentially the aim. And the song presents my story of how I grew up, being like unseen, I guess, and how it has impacted me. And yeah, so that is what this feeling is all about.